Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Yesterday, the Foreign Secretary had a few things to say about Syria. He accused the Russians of bombing hospitals they knew to be hospitals, but he also alleged that Vladimir Putin's forces have a so-called double-tap procedure. They drop one bomb, and then they wait for the aid workers to come out, and they drop another. So imagine if you lived in Aleppo, and this was your life.
Our people are being slaughtered silently. No one is doing anything.
So, 3 trucks.
No one can help us. We can't stay in this hell.
All the world is silent toward these things, these crimes.
They are doing nothing for us. Why? I just asking why.
Well, there the question was asked. Alistair, a lot of people are saying, where's the recall of Parliament? Where are the demands for action? What's your own view on whether we should be doing more at this point?
We should definitely be doing more. The question
and if so, what?
Well, the question is, I was going to say, is what it is. But I'll tell you what I think. You know, people talk a lot about Iraq and learning the lessons of Iraq. But for me, the worst lesson that has been learned is that when prime ministers do really, really difficult things, they can get political pain for it forever. And I think the turning point for me on Syria was when Barack Obama said, if Assad uses chemical weapons, that's a red line, we will not cross it. And then that happened. And then Obama tried to build a coalition, including with our parliament, and we didn't do it. And that sent a message to Assad, and it sent a message to Putin. These guys are weak, and they won't follow through difficult things. And Putin, I'm afraid, is so powerful in this now, and we don't appear to have the capacity or the strategy to stand up to it.
But you mentioned Iraq. With great respect to everything else that's been said, Iraq was complicated, and that's one of the things we've learned, and we didn't perhaps understand as a nation the complications. Syria is 10 times more complicated for all the reasons that everyone has rehearsed. But now people wonder, we are where we are. What, I mean, any of you, Nick, maybe you know, what do you think can be done? You know, we're seeing what's happening in Aleppo every night. It's agonising to watch. People look at it and they have this sort of gut feeling, we've been talking about it for 5 years, nothing's happened. What can be done realistically to improve the situation now?
Well, I think there's some things which are in our control. We could, for instance, as a country, take in far more refugees than we are. The 20,000 over 5 years, it's a very, very small number that David Cameron committed to. We're taking a tiny number of those, far fewer than France.
It's not going to make much of an impact on the 9 million they say are going to be displaced.
I started with what we can control. Yeah. Now, the problem, and I completely agree with Alistair, the problem at the moment is you have what is, I think now, fast becoming a renegade state, Russia, acting with complete and cynical opportunism, complete impunity, filling the vacuum, and I, of course, was Deputy Prime Minister who advocated that we support Obama at the time when we were proposing to take military action on the issue of chemical weapons. And Alistair's absolutely right. Since then, Putin has just filled a vacuum, and he's clearly now decided to basically flatten Aleppo in order to enforce a military victory on behalf of Assad. And we can weep at the pictures, we can have endless, debates at the UN, but the fundamental problem is that Russia, there is no cost to Russia's actions. And can I just it might sound like
what should be the cost?
Well, it might be a silly thing, but can I just point out one little thing? But actually, I think it's important. It is ludicrous that Russia is going to hold the World Cup in 2018.
Oh, yes.
What world are we in that they basically abuse people's human rights on that scale, that barbarism in Aleppo, and we will prepare to play football in Moscow in 2018.
Do you think we should boycott the World Cup? Do you think the England football team should boycott the World
I think
Cup?
if FIFA had any moral metal to it at all, it would now say that Russia has forfeited any right to host any international event. Now, it's a small
you are
symbolic
calling
thing.
for national teams to boycott the World Cup.
I'm calling for FIFA to cancel
And if they
Russia's...
don't?
But, well, if they don't...
And if they don't, do we boycott?
If they don't, if Russia is behaving like this, of course we shouldn't turn
Absolutely.
up. But the reason I'm saying that is not that won't change it in and of itself. It is a measure of how much Putin can basically mock the rest of the world, that he can bomb Aleppo and still prepare for the World Cup in
Do you agree with that?
2000.
Would you like to see that kind of drastic action?
I agree with both of them, but I just think with Syria, I think, you know, as in layman's terms, I can remember at one point we were anti-Assad, then I thought we were going to be pro-Assad, and then I'm not quite sure where we are on it, and I don't think that the British public know where we are on it with Syria either. And I think that's what's happening now. Politics, at the end of the day, or the government, is just a bunch of people in a room like this with a massive in tray with Brexit, this, that and the other, and it's like Syria, and they just go...
Well, listen,
And
there's one thing we
who
can...
wants to take on Russia?
Well, there is one thing we can address, and I just want you to have a look at this. Of course, I mentioned at the start that many refugees have already come into Europe, some who are still coming. ITV has a documentary tomorrow night, it's plugging our own programme, but I think it is really worth watching, or it looks so. And this is a little clip about a young family who've been living in a petrol station in Greece for 4 months.
They lost their mother in an airstrike. Their family home was destroyed.
مشتاقة شفيتني 3 سنين أمي ميتة وبعدين ردنا ورحنا هون.
The children fled with their aunt and uncle to Europe. They now all live in a derelict petrol station in northern Greece with other Syrian families. There are no showers or toilets here. Their home is a small tent.
Well, Julia, maybe I can come to you. I mean, you see that, and you agree with Nick that we should be taking more refugees?
I genuinely think it's absolutely absurd to think that the solution to what's happening in Syria is, well, let's take another 20,000, 100,000, whatever it is, Syrian refugees. That's not the reality. The reality is we learnt a lesson from Iraq and Afghanistan, which was, we make a terrible mess when we go into the Middle East. The lesson learned was we mustn't go in again. The lesson we've learned from Syria is we make a really big mess, possibly even a bigger mess that costs more lives and causes more chaos when we don't go in. And I agree with Alistair 100% that when Obama drew that red line about the chemical attacks and then ignored it, we basically left a massive vacuum, as you said, and then Putin filled it. It was totally predictable. It's a total abrogation of the duty, the moral duty of Western democracies and the UN, which has Russia and China have far too much say in. The absolute abrogation. We had so many things that have happened over the years, whether it's Rwanda, Bosnia, we've said, never again, never again. Well, it's just happening again, and we're sitting by and we're wringing our hands, and we'll have a big investigation into it in 10, 20 years' time. And it'll happen again, and it'll happen again.
And there will be no
At some
solution.
point, we need
That's
to
the
stand
problem.
up and we need to stop these
But
people.
would you like to see a no-fly zone? You
More
want to
than
see
a
troops
no-fly
rolling
zone.
across
I
the
wouldn't
border?
start from here. I think the Western democracies, the civilized West, needs to take on Putin. We can take him on in Syria, or we can take him on in Latvia and the Baltics, which is where he's going to be going in next.
You know the best way to take on Putin, sorry to link it to the earlier discussion, is economics.
Money, yeah,
And hang on, what do they depend on? The European Union market. We had much greater clout when we were enforcing sanctions collectively as Europe against
The
Russia.
Germans and the French tried to stop it, though, didn't they? Because they rely on him.
Exactly. And the great tragedy of many tragedies, in my view, of us now absenting ourselves from European politics is that Europe will now not be as tough with Putin as we were when we were around the
Alistair,
table.
I just want to bring you in on something, because you've sat through a million of these discussions from inside Downing Street, you know, what should we do, when should we do it, and all the rest of it, Kosovo onwards. What do you think, forgetting everything that's gone before, but knowing what you know, starting now, what could we do?
As the British government?
Yes.
Well, I mean, look, Theresa May, as Jane said, Theresa May's got a lot on her plate, and I think this is the other downside of Brexit. It's going to completely consume the government for some time to come. We've got a Foreign Secretary, frankly, who is not taken seriously around the world. And I think that is a problem. So when you read out the things that Boris Johnson says, do you think that Putin's even going to be aware of it? Do you think Lavrov's going to be aware of it? They don't care what Boris Johnson says. The European Union, America, have got to take a tougher stance on Russia and the way that it behaves. And the economics, the one time when Putin has really felt the heat was in relation to the sanctions, particularly over Ukraine. But there's a book about Russia that I recommend to people. It's called Nothing is True, Anything is Possible. And that is the way they operate. Killing people on the streets of London, blowing planes out of the sky, rolling tanks into Ukraine and saying, nothing to do with us. And you have to confront them over that. And they, of course, because they're not a democracy, they completely control all the channels of communication.
I just want to be clear then.
They're not challenged internally.
Are you saying, just while we were on the subject of the World Cup, are you suggesting that national teams, whether it be in football or athletics or anything else, should be boycotting tournaments, anything that Russia is doing? I mean, would you like to see that done? And that's...
No, well, I would certainly like... I think the only successful strategy against Russia and the way they operate at the moment is an economic one. I think it would be unfortunate if you spared the politicians the pressure that they should be under by sort of heaping it all onto sport. So that to me, would only work as part of a broader
That would just be a small
strategy.
That's a tiny little symbolic
But there's
action.
a danger it would become like the big thing that people would judge the
So all that aside, does anyone actually know where we stand as a country on Assad?
We're totally against.
Do we want him there? Do we want him out? What are we going to replace him with?
We're happy to live with the regime, but we want him out.
We've been here before.
Okay, we're coming to the end of the show, but Nick, can I just ask you, you've mentioned Russia and you've mentioned economics. We all know that or it's strongly suggested that the Russian state at the top is effectively a kleptocracy and that they've ripped off all this money. You said we could do more. Is there some stuff that from the inside of government you think we could do very specifically to focus in on Putin's money and all those around him?
Yes, we could, because London, whether we like it or not, is a venue where a lot of money is circulated, washed, laundered, sent out, and this, that. We've got huge financial muscle because of the City of London to clamp down on money that has sort of shadowy origins. Now we've improved it a lot as a country in recent times, but if we really wanted to put our mind to it, I think we could play a significant, we couldn't do it on our own, but we could play a significant role in tightening the noose on some of the money that supports the powers that be in Moscow.
Okay, big issues. Sadly, we could be talking about them all night. We'll come back next week to do some more. I'm on News at 10 tomorrow. As I said, here again next week. In the meantime, good night and thanks very much for watching.